Well, hey, stranger, it's been a while since you and I have talked. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I can't complain. Looks like you and I have gotten together here. We've been asked by prophets, or rest in peace prophets, to do this brief interview or podcast. And I'm excited to do what we're going to do, and I'm ready whenever you are.
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
Okay. It looks like one of the things that we were asked is if we could go ahead and kind of describe the pricing and nature of things like that, the open and close, just the general pricing of things that we used to have to go through when we were dealing with the public with Stonewall. So, if you would just go ahead and go into that and speak as you please as to the things that we had to deal with, and then I'll just chime in.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say, as far as space pricing itself, being a corporate owned cemetery, space pricing is pretty much the same across the board. I mean, there are promotional gardens and things like that, but the prices are nowhere near what you would see at your, local cemetery. I know where I'm located, there's a city owned cemetery where you know, even though it is pretty expensive. I mean, spaces are around $1,000 a piece, whereas the cemetery that's corporate owned, located where I'm at, is around $4,300, $4,400 per space. So I think there's a lot of these corporate owned cemeteries are really outrageous as far as the pricing is as far as it is concerned. What have you seen?
Pretty much along the same thing. The pricing could be all over the place depending on which garden that they wanted you to be in. And if you were like I was, and I'm pretty sure you were, they'd have some places that they would consider a premium garden. And it never really made sense to me as to why that was a premium garden. They would refer to it as real estate. If you were closer to the curb, you had a higher real estate appeal. One of the things that always shocked me tremendously was our open and close. For us, our open and close was around 1895. How much was yours? Do you remember?
It was around, I want to say 1750, but now that increased probably $600 or $700 within the last year.
Mm.
And that's something I think that the general public's misled on a lot is, they have spaces that their, grandparents purchased for $50, years ago, and they think that's all that's involved with it. And then, when they come to the cemetery, when someone passes, a loved one passes, and they're trying to get everything finalized, they realize that they have to pay another, in my case, 1750, in your case, almost $1,900 in order to have the open and close of the grave. And a lot of these corporate, cemeteries will let you know that, oh, it's a 30 some step process in order to lay out the grave, and then it's not just digging it, but it's pretty much not the truth. I mean, it's pretty much you're making sure it's the right space when you work at the cemetery, and putting a flag in it for the family, and then it's digging and closing the grave. But for the amount of 17, 18, $1,900, it's sort of very high priced, especially if it's expense that you're not expecting when that there's local. Even the funeral home sometimes will have people that will dig graves for them, and I know a guy locally that digs them for $400 per space. So it's pretty outrageous when you go through a corporate cemetery.
And the way it was explained to me is like, you're working for a sales company and you've got to factor in, you've got to pay the backhoe operator, you've got to pay the admin, you've got to pay the sales rep who goes out. And of course, we were always told to refer to them as counselors. And at the end of the day, they actually were sales reps. And the thing that shocked me the most was in getting the actual true figure for us at the time. It was $45 our actual cost to do an open and close. So for us, we were almost charging 45 times more to do that open and close. Is that pretty much what happened with you as well?
Yeah, it is. And what you're talking about having to pay the admin and the people, the maintenance guys that are digging it for you. I mean, really you look at that expense and it's not as much the open and close is is the fact of it's just another charge in order a way to make money off of families that maybe got the spaces from their grandparents or their parents. And this is just another way to make money because you're not making it off of a new sale.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And to me, it was always one of those things to where I felt like, hey, it's just justification. It's just all it is. And I mean, you think about it. I know, for example, when we go and get gas, all the taxes that are involved and all that, and I get all that, but for cemetery to take a piece of dirt, they've already calculated how much it's going to cost them, and they've multiplied that up for the profit to make sure they pay everybody. And then they stop and take a good hard look at their open and close and say, okay, we actually have this broken down and know that this only is going to cost us $45. And then next thing hey, your open and close is 1,800. It's 1,900. And for us, because you and I worked at under the same guard at the exact same time. I mean, just to build a little bit of transparency, you and I actually started at the exact same time. Um, we were told hold on to this open and close, even though it's $45, and do not discount the open and close, and do not give it away. And I'm pretty sure you ran into that a lot too, just as I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, and that's the toughest thing about it is when you're dealing with a family on the worst day of their life, a loved one's passed, and then you're charging them that much on the open and close, and you may have sometimes just one person come in to talk with you about planning the burial. Then you may have 10, and it can go south pretty quick as far as the verbal abuse that the managers and the sales counselors have to put up with and go through with the families that are not expecting this charge. And that's when the staff at the cemetery is doing the most work as far as sales counselor, sales manager, and the craziest thing about it is they don't even earn any commission on all of this, $1,700 to $1,900. They don't even earn a commission on it. And that's when they're doing, most of the work with the family.
And as well as I do, we've seen many a counselor or family service counselor, although internally we always refer to them as sales. We've seen them lose their jobs in regards to this open and close because, like, we told you not to discount it, we told you not to give it away, and yet here you are. Which brings up another interesting, topic too, which you and I, when we got together earlier today to kind of hash out what we were going to talk about for rest and profits, is the liners. And for my area, and if I am correct in memory, your area too, we never sold a lot of liners because the funeral home would get them, and that's because we were taking a $350 lined vault and we were selling it for $2,000. Is that how you remember it as well?
Yeah, and that's nobody wants just a standard concrete vault. Usually they want it lined. And absolutely the customer families would always go and get it from the funeral home. And wouldn't, we wouldn't even really have a shot at getting that. Number one, we were priced out of the market. I mean, you're not, a lot of things, you double the price of it when you're paying, $350 and turn around and selling it for 2,000. It's really taking advantage of the families at an emotional time. Same thing with like you're talking about discounting the open and close. You can't at need when someone passes because they know that in order to have their family member buried there, they're going to have to pay that amount of money. I mean, I've seen it to where families would have to wait a week or more when the loved one could have been buried in a couple of days because they had to get the money together in order to bring to the cemetery in order to pay that open and close, which is it's outrageous.
It is. It's almost like the human component would be forgotten. It's like whatever you have to do at any cost, go ahead and make that sale. And yeah, given our backgrounds, both of us have a background involving sales and different things. You know as well as I do, this was just a completely different animal, and it's like you alluded to earlier. Really are meeting people on the worst day of their lives. I mean, the very worst day of their lives, and you're sitting there telling them, you've got to come up with all this money right now because you didn't pre-plan. And it's one of the things we didn't talk about earlier, but it's come to mind. They would tell us, they didn't pre-plan, so you've got to sock it to them. And I know you did. I know I did because I remember us having meetings with upper management about it. There's companies out there now, as far as at need, who will come in and buy the contract and charge the families on the back end interest and all that, and we're already paid. But given the company that we work for, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to say, "Hey, look, we're not willing to give up $300 or $400 to give this contract to you so that you can make that up in interest. We want everything we can get now." So the family has to pay us up front. And I have a friend who's still in the industry who worked with us, who has left us or left the company that we worked with, and now works with another company, which I won't name. And they have a program to where if you come in there at need, they will work with you and keep you from having to come up with, $10,000, $15,000 out of pocket up front. All they're asking for is, 500, 600, maybe $1,000 down, and they'll finance it with another company who will take care of it. And I mean, to me, that comes across as highway robbery. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the first I'd heard about someone that would finance at need, but I think it's great that they're doing that because it really comes down to, the name of the program or channel here that we're doing this for. It's rest in profits because there's no peace. I mean, it's all about profit. It's all about the bottom line versus the family. And you can imagine, we always had, I'm pretty sure you were in the same situation, we always had a high turnover of sales reps slash family counselors. But you can imagine after putting a family through this of having to come up with all this money or we're not performing the service or the burial, then the corporate higher ups won't expect you to go and get referrals from this family in order to sell them pre-need.
Yeah.
And, there was lots of counselors that either left or were let go because sales counselors, because, they didn't get enough referrals. They didn't get enough business. But it's two different worlds working in, for the higher ups in corporate and then working at the location. The location, most of the people that work there do, I know I can name a lot, but do, and that are still there, but do care about the families and want the best for the families. And, they're frustrated because of the fact that, they sort of feel like, and they know these families in the community, but they feel like they're ripping them off and putting them through all this. But I mean, I've had sales managers before that would call and talk to the family and apologize to them. And, basically the only thing they could do is blame it on the higher ups in corporate. But it just comes down to caring more about the bottom line than the families, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree. I completely agree. And one thing that we talked about earlier, um, for me, and this situation was very true. And I actually dealt with this going through training when I started, and I was just so excited to work in what I thought was going to be a position where I could help people and empower people and provide a ministry to people. I remember very clearly being in training and being pulled out of training to deal with customers that I was not equipped to deal with. I mean, after I was 3 days into training, I didn't know what to say to them. I didn't know what to go about. And then I get home and my children are being told, because of this situation in the cemetery, the grass is too high, you've charged too much, the asphalt hasn't been paved in years. The cemetery was beautiful 20 years ago with flowers everywhere, bells ringing, waterfalls, things like that. You get home and your children are telling you, uh, "Hey, Daddy, my classmates are telling me that you're scum because you don't care about the dead people in the cemetery." And did you ever run up on anything like that? Chat me up
Oh,
on that.
daily. I would say daily.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah, I mean
absolutely.
it's sad to think that the local city cemetery where the spaces are cheaper, and you could get someone that can actually come in and dig the grave. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be dug by the corporation, but they have perpetual care. They have people that are out there working daily to make sure the grass is mowed, to make sure the weeds are trimmed, and you know when the corporations are promising perpetual care, and 10% of your uh, sale price of your space, that's where it goes, is for perpetual care. But it really makes you wonder, where does that money go? Because it's supposed to go for perpetual care into a fund, but I don't know that that's the case.
I don't really know either. And I know you and I both were involved in what we call pre-cons, and in the industry, a pre-con is where you actually sell the pre-construction of a mausoleum. And I know for you and me, there were many times it's like you need to sell so many of these pre-cons, and you'd reach out to a family and sell a pre-con. You might sell 20, 30, or 40 of them. And then next thing you know, when it comes time to build, because if I remember right, and you correct me, the state mandates, or the state that we live in, you got 5 years to take care of this. And the next thing you know, they're like, well, no, we're going to pull the pre-con because the trust money was misappropriated. I've had that conversation at least 3 times, and I'm sure you have too. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And I can remember one instance when I first started that we had a call from the corporate office asking us about, it was around a $35,000 check. If someone had put that down on, or, was it a deposit? What had happened? And come to find out, it was money for a pre-con at a certain cemetery. And I'm not sure where the money went to, but the pre-con was never built.
Yeah,
So, that was, best my recollection, was around $35,000.
yeah, yeah. And I ran up on that myself at least twice. And that's just one of the things that I had to deal with. I also had to deal with um, wrongful burials. I know of at least 4 instances in 4 different cemeteries that I oversaw where we had a wrongful burial, and sometimes it wasn't actually Stonemore's fault. It was the company that owned it beforehand. But again, it's like, y'all have bought you've bought these cemeteries. Did you not do any due diligence? Did you not look at this and say, hey, this might not be a good idea to buy? And I know of a couple of instances where we go out there to dig a grave. They start with the backhoe, and next thing you know, they're coming up with clothing and bones and things like that. And I'm sure you saw that as well. But the thing that was most concerning to me was cover it up. I mean, I was told multiple times by upper management, cover this up. It wasn't our fault. Listen, we know that staff, because we had to hurry up and get them out in the sales field to go ahead and make sales, they might not have been properly trained. Maybe the backhoe operator wasn't properly trained because we needed to go ahead and get him moving, or the admin couldn't flag the grave in the proper way to get this done. But we're going to cover this up and blame this on the previous company. And sometimes it actually was a previous company, but for me, in my experience, if we go 5 times, a good 3 out of those 5 times was our own fault, and there we are covering the issue up. Pun intended, I guess, covering the issue up. Did you run into that as well, where you had a wrongful burial, where you were given a directive from upline, cover this up? It's not our fault, even though it was.
Yeah, that was always the case, was to try to cover it up. But they would always want to know, upper management want to know about the family, what the family was saying, if they knew about it. And, if they didn't know about it, yeah, the first thing is cover it up and, don't say anything. But if the family did know about it, they want to know a little bit about the family and find out, you know, I hate to say, how smart they were, but basically that was it. And if they complained a little bit about it, it was, oh, we'll give you, an extra 25% off of a marker, which is a whole nother subject as far as marker pricing. But, 25% off of a marker in order to, and have them sign a release, basically, not holding us liable for anything like that. But, that was if the family did find out about it. But a lot of times they didn't, and like you said, it was just covered up.
And that's the experience I had. The more educated a family was, the better they did. Whereas somebody who for whatever the reasons, was not as educated as somebody else, they tend to pay the price. But you brought the markers up, and I know we weren't scheduled to talk about that, but it's out there. You want to tell about some of your experiences with the markers?
Well, I can tell you a recent experience after I stopped working for the corporation that I was working with. Had, and I mean, people out there listening, put yourself in the shoes of this family. But lady was pregnant, and her baby passed before she had delivered the baby. So anyway, they ended up, getting a space at the cemetery, and they decided basically that they would give them the space, which was pretty much a um, standard thing, give them space for $100 for perpetual care. But they didn't charge, which is great. A lot of the cemeteries have a baby garden, or what they would always call baby land. Um, but yeah, the marker was going to be 12 inches by 20 inches, I believe it was, which you could get, at a local marker, mom and pop marker business for, not that much, even though if it had bronze on it. I mean, you're probably maybe high end $1,000, maybe. But the corporation wanted to charge this family who had just lost their baby. They, of course, they didn't want to leave the grave unmarked, but they wanted to charge them at need. Then there was no discount, of course, at need marker, and it was going to be about $3,400. So you can imagine how that added to the issues that they had going on, and the grief. They just lost the baby, and it's just greed, corporate greed, and when they could have helped that family out.
Yeah, and if you remember in training, we were told point blank, once you hit that nerve, turn that volume up as high as you can, make them feel that heat and make them feel that pain, because they'll get it in their mind. If I don't do my loved one this way, if I don't do this for daddy, or if I don't do this for my mama or my husband or my wife, I've got to deal with it at the end of the day. And it was like, the more you can get them to spend, the more money you're going to make. And I ran up on that, and I know you did. And that's just prevalent across the industry. And Stonemore was really big on promoting that. Stick it to them until you can get them to cry. Once you can get them to cry, they're going to open their checkbook or their wallet and spend whatever they need to spend. And I'm pretty sure that's how you remember that too, right?
Yeah, and talking about like earlier, going back to the vaults, they were 350, maybe $400, and they're selling them for 2,000. Same thing with the markers. I mean, it was standard practice in our marker pricing across the board. Whatever the cost was, it was 3.2 to 3.5 times whatever that cost was. So if say your marker cost, to make and produce $1,000, then you were looking at paying $3,200 to $3,500, not counting any kind of fees and taxes and all that stuff. So I can understand. So a lot of businesses will mark things up; they'll double the money just so they can make some money. But 3.2, 3.5 times markup is, like I said, it's just greed.
Yes. And it looks like I'm getting signal by the engineer here that we've got roughly about 5 more minutes before we have to shut down. But I remember one time being called up on the carpet and literally getting my ass spanked over giving discounts and things like that. And I was being told, you got to remember, you work for a sales organization. This is how we make our money. They may not have the money to take care of this, but they need to go ahead and take care of it. So you need to go out and make sure your staff flags 3 or 4 or 5, 6 other graves around where their loved ones being buried. And you need to make sure you tell them, hey, if you don't go ahead and lock this in today, it won't be here tomorrow. Um, I remember being issued warnings on things like that. I'm sure you do as well. Um, do you? For me, I know for me, I remember very well at least four sales reps who quit. I'm not going to do that. Did you run into things like that as well?
Well, absolutely. And in sales, I mean, that's of course, the background that they're looking for because they're looking, to make as much money as possible. But, and I've took credit cards and past businesses took credit card deposits over the phone for thousands and thousands of dollars. But it's a really hard sell when you have a grieving family that's come to place the flag at the grave where they're getting ready to bury their grandfather or, worst case, a child. And you're trying to, as a sales rep, pitch them to buy more property while they're grieving. And if you don't, you're going to either get wrote up or lose your job.
Exactly. In the 4 minutes that we've got left, let's talk about that really quick about the credit cards and the things like that. It's prevalent across Stonemore. If you don't deal with one particular bank, which is well, let's just go ahead and call it the Bank of America, which is not really across the board in a lot of states now. You had to send your admin to get money orders. They had to receive the money orders, come back, and then go deposit that. Then you had to take your sales reps who would have to collect a credit card on paper. They'd have to write the credit card on paper because Stonemore would not be willing to lose the credit card charges, and that would breed embezzlement. And we ran up on that several times. And it's just another one of those poor business practices where it's like you're going to have to get a money order. You're going to have them write down the credit card number. And in an office, the chain of command was, and I'm sorry, we've only got 2 more minutes, but the chain of command was the rep would write down the number, and they had to sell the credit card idea to the customer. Hey, you're going to have to let me write this down. So then that would get passed to the admin. The admin would take that and input everything. So now they're seeing at it. So now you've got two employees. More than likely, the maintenance employee's desk, the supervisor, was right beside the admin. So now that's the third person who sees it. And then there's the fourth person who could come in, who could be another rep, another admin, or another maintenance person. And would you speak to that really quick? Because I know for a fact that just bred a ground for criminal activity.
Well, and you're right on that. And I know we only got a minute or so left, but the easiest thing to say is that nothing was secure or protected. The cemetery industry or this corporation is really far behind in the times. I mean, I think it might be great for the older generation, but not for the younger generation that are doing business with them. But yeah, everything was on paper. Not just credit cards, which led to, like you said, it could be a lot of criminal activity, but all files, situations where there were, fires, things like that, everything was destroyed. There's no record. So, yeah, very behind in the times as far as technology and the way to secure payments.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things to where if somebody were to break into one of these locations, all they'd have to do is hit a file cabinet, and it would be like a treasure a, a treasure chest of everything.
Receipt books laying around, things like that.
Exactly. And the average person doesn't realize none of this goes on computer file, none of this goes on microfilm. It's all right there, paper, and it's like you said, a fire would be just horrible.
You're correct.
Yeah. So, well, I'm being waved off by the engineer now. Looks like we've only got a few more minutes. Is there anything that you'd like to add? And we're being asked to do this again to speak of some other things. Is there anything you would like to end with, or maybe preview for the next time we get together?
Well, I would say there are a lot. We always had lots of complaints about different things, and I'll just keep this brief and we can discuss it next time. But basically, if you have a complaint, whether it's the grass being mowed, something's happened to the grave, whatever it might be, your best bet to get it resolved immediately is go to your cemetery commission, state cemetery commission.
Exactly.
If you do that, corporations will handle it. If you go to the Better Business Bureau or anything like that, it's not going to be handled. It's just going to be everything's going to be put off and you'll never get anything resolved. Go to your state cemetery commission and file a complaint.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as far as on my end, I think the next time we get together, we'll talk about the maintenance, grass upkeep, marker damage, um, and truthfully, the really the horrible things that we saw on the back end as far as families. We only touched briefly about it, about the wrongful burials, and we kind of need to go back and read